So hello, we're now recording. Today's February 10th, and I'm really excited to launch our webinar series for Technovation so that we can help our mentors, students, and coaches along as they work on their Technovation projects. And for this, we selected some pretty interesting people who can give you guys some inside scoop tips on things that they do in their industries to help them create technology products. And we've invited mentors, students, and coaches to take part. So I wanted to welcome you guys all. And as you heard me mention before, we're going to be recording this. So if you couldn't make it or you can't take notes, don't worry. The recording of this webinar will go up on the Technovation website after. And if you look in your materials section of the panel that you have, you can download the presentation that Alex is about to give. So I'll remind you about that at the end too. So Alex is joining us from Idealab in LA, which is a company that operates pioneering tech companies. They help create them and operate them. He's the Vice President of Business Development at Idealab. And how cool is a name like Idealab? Just to give you a taste of what's to come. So Alex has joined us today to help answer a few questions about what actually is a startup, because some of you have been asking that throughout the process. So we wanted to clarify what that is, and also what kind of qualities a company like Idealab is looking for in entrepreneurs that they're helping. So he's your guy, and he's here today to help answer questions and talk a little bit more. I know a lot of you on your teams, whether you're a coach, mentor, or student, may still be deciding on the problem that you want to be solving. And this is a really important part of the process that you should not skimp on. So if you're on Unit 2 and you're still brainstorming, that's great. This will help you out a lot. And if you've moved on to Unit 3, which is about market research, I'm sure Alex will have a little bit to talk about for that. And even if you've made it all the way to Unit 4, where we're talking about paper prototyping, thinking about potential solutions and who your users are, this is also great for you. So don't worry where you are in the beginning units, but know that this is very important. So you're at the beginning stages of your projects, and Alex has generously offered to spend some time with us today to talk about just how important this is and how you can focus better on brainstorming and prototyping and testing your ideas before you go further in your project as you develop your mobile apps. So Alex is here, and I'll put him on in just a second to talk about what actually the process is at Idealab to help make these ideas come to life. And right after he gives a presentation about that and you learn a little bit more about him, he will answer your questions. So we'll have about a 15-minute chat that he will lead, and then we'll do some Q&A. So if you could, just write down your questions, and when the time comes after, if you want to put them in the chat, I'll curate these and we'll talk about them. So think about how your project is going, and think about where Alex can really lend his expertise to what you're doing. So now I will switch it over to Alex. Hold on just a second. And make him the presenter. So can everybody see Alex's screen? It might just take a few seconds here, so bear with us. You could use your chat room and let us know if you can hear and see him. That'd be great. Alex, how's your sound? Oh, hold on just a second. Okay, Alex, we should be able to hear Alex now.
Great. Hello, everybody. Are you there? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So thank you all for joining us today. I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'll tell you a little bit about Idealab, but before I begin, I'll tell you briefly a bit about myself. As Amy said, my name is Alex. I'm the Vice President of Business Development here at Idealab. I've been working in startups and only startups since 1999. So I have a lot of experience in a wide variety of fields related to startups, sales, marketing. I'm an attorney, so I've done the legal side, and now I'm using all of that information and helping Idealab create pioneering companies. So before we get into some of the other discussions that we'll talk about, I'll tell you quickly about Idealab itself. We've been around since 1996. It was founded by our founder and CEO, Bill Gross. He's a Caltech undergrad. He is on the board now of Caltech as well, the Art Center here in Pasadena. And really, it was a way for Bill to start many companies at once. He was successful in a number of companies. One was related to educational software, which is, I'm sure, a passion of all of ours, and ultimately decided he wanted to do many things at the same time, and so he founded Idealab almost 20 years ago. It'll be 20 years in March. And what we do is we think of ideas, we test those ideas, and ultimately we start companies. We've started 153 companies since 1996. We've helped raise $3.5 billion of capital for those companies and helped support over 10,000 jobs. So we're very proud of what we've done here at Idealab, and we hope to do that for many, many years. For those of you who are familiar with Idealab, you may see on this slide a smattering of some of the companies that we've started. Our most well-known is probably Overture, which created the sort of AdSense model that Google obviously makes gobs and gobs of money with now. But we've also done some social things as well. We had a company called Free PC, which provided free computers to people, and in return, we showed them advertising, and so they could take a look at the ads. We would get feedback for the advertisers who were providing those ads, and the users themselves would actually get free computers to do with what they want. And so we've done robotics, we've done solar, we've done software, we've done hardware. We do a little bit of it all. So it's important to know, first and foremost, what is a startup? When we talk about startups and Idealab starting startups, what do I mean by that? So I'm going to go briefly into sort of some segments of companies and how we categorize this. So what you see on your screen now is Mike's Corner Store. There's one of these in almost every town in America and probably all over the world. It's really typically a family-run enterprise. It's a small business. It has a few employees, perhaps, but it's really never taken any outside capital other than a bank loan, perhaps, and is in the business for itself. You then have the next tier, what we call middle market businesses. These are companies that are a little bit larger than your corner store, but still are not typically publicly listed. They're not extremely big ideas necessarily. That's not to say they're not great ideas, but they're not really gigantic companies when you think of Google and Facebook and some of the other ones. And then we have really big businesses, which is a company like Disney. It's a global operation. You can buy stock in the public markets in Disney. Everybody sort of knows the brand that is Disney. And this is really what we're talking about when we decide on what we're looking for. And so, you know, when we talk about startups, is it a Bravo reality show featuring beautiful people? Maybe some of you have seen that show on television. It's not what it is. Nor is it the corner store or the small business like a car wash would be. What it really is a relatively new form company that's attempting to establish a really big business. So it's small for a while, but it has a goal of scaling into a very big business, and it's reaped some investment from investors who want it to be a big business, and it's really sort of a swing big for the fences type of company. If it doesn't go big, it'll likely be acquired or go out of business. So I think that's important to note of what we're talking about. So we're talking about companies that start very small, but always have their eye on growing into a very big business. So what Idealab looks for in startups is very important. When we decide what we want to start, the first thing we look at is how big the potential market is. And when you hear people talking about market size, we're talking multi-billion-dollar markets and the ability to sort of support multi-hundred-million-dollar revenue companies. So when you think of Disney, entertainment as a whole is obviously a very large market. When you look at Facebook, it turns out that social media is a very large market. So we want to go into places where we think there's large markets and that can support many big businesses. We also look for whether or not this is a solution to a real pain point. And we joke at Idealab, is this a vitamin or is this an aspirin? People forget to take their vitamins because they're preventative, but if you have pain, if your knee hurts or you have a fever, you do take the aspirin. You will do that. And so we want to be in the business of providing real solutions to real pain points. The next thing we look for is really all around differentiation. So is what we're creating, 10x better than what already exists? If you're building a business and you're just slightly better than the competition, it's very hard for you to differentiate yourself. But if you are 10x or 100x better than the competition, then we're really talking about breakthrough technologies. We often look at Tesla as sort of the example of that. Lots of people had done electric cars and electric vehicles, but no one had done it with the technology and the efficacy that Tesla had done, really building a sports car that is capable of being put right up there with the best gasoline-powered cars, and so that's what we're looking for. And then finally, it's people. The people are the drivers of every successful business that you'll ever see. An idea can be great, and if the execution is poor, it won't work. An idea can be okay, and if the execution is great, it might just be a really big business. And so our main focus is in finding talented people who can help us really drive these businesses forward and create long-lasting companies. This next slide here is really the heart of Idealab. So this is our process, and you'll see at the top it's titled Systematic De-risking. And what we're trying to do is take some of the risk out of these ideas as we look to figure out what companies we're going to start. And so I'll walk you through this sort of process, but you'll see this written on the screen as well. First thing we do, again, like we talked about, is look for big opportunities and challenges. And so this is the market bullet I was talking about earlier. Bill Gross, our founder, myself, and a few other core employees, we literally have meetings once a week, and we're thinking about, what ideas are out there that are really sort of seeing breakthrough areas of improvement. You see a lot of discussion around healthcare these days. You see a lot of discussion around education. You see a lot of discussion around robotics. You've seen drones and autonomous vehicles. So we're looking at things that might be, really big markets or grow into really big markets, and where we can bring something unique to the table. The next thing we're doing is brainstorming solutions to these problems. So if the problem is, for example, there's no really good-looking performance vehicle that runs on electricity out there, we might think of, well, how would we solve that solution? Well, we could build a car like Tesla that's beautiful looking, is very powerful, is very fast, and really determine, at the first stages, what that might look like. And then we go to the next stage, which is really the most important, we think, which is prototyping that idea. And when people think of prototype, they may think of different things, but the way we think about it at Idealab is, what can we do that's very quick and usually very cheap to prove a hypothesis that we have? And believe it or not, we do a lot of this through no coding at all. We don't build any product. We ask a lot of questions. We call potential customers. We do a lot of wireframing and design to sort of show people what this product might look like. There's lots of tools available these days that allow you to build clickable prototypes, so it might look like a real product, but in fact it's not. It's just a series of slides that are laid out in a way where you can show customers or potential customers what that might look like. And you prototype these ideas and you're thinking about what you yourself might build. I would encourage you to do as much work up front in figuring out if people actually want your solution before you spend a lot of time building a solution that you don't know if people want. And once we do that, we build a working model. And this is something that we actually put out into the marketplace. We'll get real feedback on that. And we're taking all of this data and we're putting that back into our build. And you'll see this sort of circular up in the top left corner here, build, measure, learn. We're taking all that data and we're putting that constantly back into the product that we're building. If we like the idea, we form a business. and then we have to go raise outside capital and ultimately build a team. And again, we're still iterating and growing. But really, it's all about finding the ideas that are worthwhile and prototyping those ideas. And then finally, I thought I'd share with you what the anatomy of an Idealab entrepreneur might look like. They're very smart. They're very analytical. They're coachable in the sense that they don't think they always know the right answers, but they're talking to as many experts as they can or potential customers as they can. They're always promoting their product or their company. It's something that they think about all the time. There's really a fire in their gut about what they're doing, and mostly it's about solving a particular problem. The product may take a different take. It may look different, but they're always focused on the problem they're trying to achieve. And so anybody can really be an entrepreneur. It just takes a lot of thoughtful approaches towards what you're doing, talking to a lot of people, and taking all that feedback and putting that into your product. And so with that, I think that's enough about Idealab. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of insight into how we do things and how we start companies. I'd love to open it up to some questions.
We have one so far from Ghislaine. So she asks, most innovative products are actually high risk. What sorts of risks are you willing to take or invest in for any idea?
Yeah, that is a great question, and it's very true. We feel that because we are in the startup game and our product is really startup companies, we're in a very risky business. But with high risk comes high reward. You can be very impactful as an employee in a startup. You can drive a lot of impact in the business that you couldn't necessarily do in a large business. And the financial rewards can be quite large as well. And so the numbers out there that we see is 1 or 2 out of every 10 companies is successful. Idealab, we think we have a pretty good process. Our hit rate is more around 4 or 5 out of 10 companies, but it is a very high risk business, and you have to have that risk profile as you build these things and as you go out and find jobs to really be an entrepreneur, because it's a very difficult business to be in. But that's a great question.
I see another cool question that I hear a lot in Technovation, and that's how do you manage the tendency of team members wanting to go straight to the solution before the problem is defined?
Yes, another great question. And, again, we primarily focus on what are we trying to solve? What is the real problem we're trying to solve? If we don't have a good understanding of what that problem is, we'll never be able to find a solution that would actually alleviate that problem. And so most of our time, believe it or not, is spent up front defining the problem, defining it as what we're trying to prove, whatever that hypothesis may be, and ultimately spending the majority of the time up front defining those issues before building any product.
Cool. Another question just came in about how do you take a small idea and transform it into a fully functional product?
Wow, another great question. I can probably tell this best through a story. We were going to start a company that was going to provide gasoline delivery on demand. So if you have a car owner, it's in your office parking lot or at home 90% of the time. So we thought, well, maybe we can bring gasoline to people and make a big company. So the first thing we did is all we did was send an email to everyone in the company here at Idealab. There's about 200 people in the building. It said, never go to the gas station again. If you're interested, sign up. And we literally drove their cars to the gas station and filled them up and put them back in the parking spot. So we didn't build any product at all. We were just testing demand. And it wasn't until we thought there was enough demand that we started thinking about how we would actually scale that. And so I think the important lesson here is you're taking that small idea, but you're testing it in ways where you're not even building a product, and then you get to a point where you can actually build a product down the line. But solving the problem first is markedly more important.
Before I jump to the next question, I'm wondering if you guys have typical questions you might ask people about when you're testing something. Are there any questions that tend to come up a lot that help you answer some things?
Yeah, I mean, when we're talking to potential customers and we're selling a product, the first thing we do is talk to them again about the problem, about their pain points, and we ask them, would they pay for it? Now, people will say yes, they'll pay for it, and then oftentimes when the product comes out, they won't pay for it. But it's a good indication of whether you're on the right track. but the best advice and the best questions we ask customers is really, what what's your pain point? What could you envision that would make your job or your life easier? And we put the onus really on that customer to define for us what the biggest problem is, rather than think we have a real understanding of those problems. So the more time you spend outside talking to actual customers or potential customers, the more informed you'll be in building a product.
So students and all sorts of mentors and coaches take heed with that, because sometimes the students might be jumping to solutions before they really understand what the user needs. And I think in app development, that's pretty important. So let me see some of the other kinds of questions. Before we jump into Lillian's, I was thinking we could talk about Wendy's question. How do you decide which ideas should be pursued over others? Like, how do you prioritize them, you know?
Yeah, we look at roughly 120 ideas a year, and we try to stack rank the top 10 at any given time. And that top 10 changes all the time based on where capital is being deployed, based on our ability to find a team to actually pursue that idea, based on how well we think the idea has been thought out. And then for the top 3 out of that 10, we're actively pursuing, we're actively working on it. So there's resources being put to bear on that product. And that could be, again, talking to customers, building a prototype, putting a little capital into the company, starting the company. So at any given time, we're constantly shifting that top 10 into a top 3 that we're working on. But it's so variable. It's really about what's getting the most traction. And what do customers really want? What are they seeing in our prototypes that we feel we could build a company around? And again, going back to the earlier points of, is this a big market? Do we have people that could start this company with us? And are we solving a real pain point?
So that leads me to another. We've been getting a few questions about how do you assess whether your idea is better than an already existing one or the competitor's idea?
Yeah, it's a great question, and we always go back to, are we doing something that's different? If you look at the history of social networks, for example, you had Friendster that was doing okay, you had a number of other ones, and it wasn't until Facebook where it really took off. And if you look back at the history, the early product wasn't that much different. It was timing, really, and it was the way in which they distributed their product. There was a level of exclusivity in the beginning where it was relegated only to colleges. And so, we try to think of things that are 10x, again, markedly better than what the competition is doing, but timing and team and execution all play a huge role in how successful those companies can be.
That's really neat. I've worked with a lot of students before who came up with similar solutions to things like Fitbit or something that can tie an app to a wearable or something. And they don't seem to notice, they don't do enough of the research to make sure that they're coming up with an innovative idea, because they're kind of they don't know the other things exist. Do you have any tips on how they can do a little bit of that market research?
Yeah, it's always a good idea to sort of understand your competitors, not to be worried about what they're doing or what you should be doing, but just to be aware of what's already out there. You'll be more informed as a product designer or product creator knowing what already exists. And what you want to be really is a subject matter expert in whatever it is you're building. So if you're building, a fitness application that tracks your calorie count, for example, or your movement, you should be well aware of all the other applications that are doing that, so you can design a better product. And nowadays, there's tons of information available on the web. You can read technology news at TechCrunch and VentureBeat and Recode and all these other sources. You can go to Crunchbase and see what companies have already started. But having a handle on what already exists only informs you on what you'll do next. So we always encourage people to really understand the competitive marketplace.
Another question that came in is, what are some of the indicators that the timing of an idea is appropriate? Not too early, not too late.
That's another great question. And again, it's a matter of talking, I think, to customers and doing as much upfront work before you're building the product. If you think about it, something like Instagram could never exist without a mobile phone. And so I think the timing was right there. People started taking pictures because cameras were going away because you had a camera on your phone. People were into social sharing and social networks. And so the timing just seemed to be right. And I can't tell you that Instagram knew that, but they knew enough about the market trends and where things were going. They knew mobile phones were exploding. They knew people were taking more pictures. They knew people like to share pictures. That ultimately they hit on a product that was just perfectly timed for what they were doing. So taking stock and being aware of sort of what trends are happening, I think will inform you on whether or not the timing is correct for your product.
That's really neat. Um, is there anybody able to hear Alex? I just got a message that it might have cut out a little bit. Okay, good. I'm glad you're back. Another question that came in that I thought was neat was talking a little bit about the market for the product. This is a little bit ahead in the curriculum, but I think it's important to think about now. So, at what point do you decide to expand the market for your product? Are there any specific criteria that you guys use at Idealab?
When you say expand the market for the product, maybe you could tell me a little bit more about what you mean. I'm not sure I'm following there.
Oh, that was a question from one of the participants.
Oh,
Maybe she can elaborate a little bit. If she doesn't, we could.
maybe she's talking about how do you know that you have a product that is going to be a real big success, and how do you know the market is capable of doing that? And again, I would always point back towards talking to as many people as possible, uh, talking to potential customers, and ultimately you'll get feedback that informs whether or not you're onto something and whether or not you should sort of double down on what you're doing or whether you need to change course to react to that feedback. So being open to as much data and as much feedback as possible as you're designing and as you're building and as you're using your product is really important.
Okay, I think I have a question here that is really applicable to the students in the Technovation program. So the question is, the background to this is that the girls in the program are developing an app that's focused on community help or nonprofit sort of things. Where does revenue fit into that? Have you ever worked with a community-based organization, and can you address that?
Yeah, and in fact, there's a new type of corporation called a B Corp that is specifically for sort of social enterprises, and everyone always points to Tom's Shoes as the quintessential
Hmm.
social enterprise, right? For every pair of shoes that you buy from Tom's, they donate a pair of shoes to somebody else, and so it's always a tricky balance there between providing good and making money, but there are certainly uh, opportunities to do that. And in fact, we had a company that was providing solar panel lights to people in rural India. There's not a lot of electricity, if any at all, and we created a company called Duron Energy that had a little battery that was attached to a solar panel that was attached to a light, and you could leave that outside all day. It would charge the solar panel, and then you could use that light at night for doing your homework or doing cooking or doing whatever it is you need to do. And there was a tricky balance there, but there are opportunities for doing good and making money. So I don't think they're mutually exclusive by any means.
Nice. I was wondering if you've ever worked with a team or a company that is particularly young, because the girls in our program are between 10 and 19. And I know, having worked at the Computer History Museum before, that Y Combinator is there a lot. And oftentimes I see, 20-year-olds or so, a lot of guys working to get pitch their products and stuff. Do you ever see any common, I wouldn't say mistakes, but do you have any advice for people who are kind of young and are still learning the ropes on how to come up with this idea and kind of differentiate their ideas from other people's?
Yeah, I mean, I think again, we've worked with entrepreneurs. I think as young as 17 and
Oh,
into their 60s, and so we think age is just a number. It doesn't really mean anything for the entrepreneurial realm. But some of the mistakes that we see younger entrepreneurs make, is, again, not getting outside enough and talking to potential customers,
Mm.
not spending enough time up front in understanding what the real problem is they're trying to solve. Lots of times they think of a cool idea, they think it's cool, they spend a lot of time building it, and they put it out there, and then they're disappointed by the response. And so, again, spending enough time up front in defining the problem and getting as much feedback as you can before you build the product, and even as you continue to build the product, informing your decisions of how you're going to continue to build the product is important. And so I would encourage everybody to sort of get as much feedback as you can. People are guarded about their idea. They say, well, if I don't want to tell the idea because then somebody else might do it, we say go ahead and tell people, because it takes a lot of guts and a lot of time and a lot of passion to actually build it and execute on it. But you'll get important feedback that you might not get elsewhere.
I want to just interject the topic of failure here because a lot of girls that I worked with in the past have been a little shy or reluctant to share their ideas or go out there and really get some answers and questions. What is the role of failure in this? Do you guys see, a good thing about failure in a way?
Yeah, we have a very strong culture of failure. We accept failure wholeheartedly. Most of our businesses fail. It's part of being in the startup world. It's part of being an entrepreneur. What we don't like is if you spend a lot of money to fail, or it takes you a long time to fail, or you fail at the same thing twice. So failure is a natural part of entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship as a whole. And what we encourage here at Idealab is fail quickly, fail cheaply, and learn from your mistakes. But to actually go out and do something that is probably going to end up in failure is something we actually pride ourselves in. We know not everything we do is going to turn out, but we can't get feedback and we can't get data and we can't get information on what we should do better next time without failing. So we encourage people to fail. We just encourage them to fail smartly.
I think there's a lot to be learned from failure. I think Carol has a comment to this effect. So she says, we did survey people about the girls' audience, and they got a lot of negative response, and they were really discouraged. And then we encouraged them to change the wording of the survey, and their response really changed. So it was really a lesson that survey and misleading or guiding really depend on the details. So yeah, I guess in this case,
Yeah,
came down to wording.
yeah, and absolutely, and they wouldn't have known which direction to move had they not gotten that feedback. And so I know it's discouraging to sort of put something out there that you've worked very hard on, and it's not met with the response that you've expected. But if you remain steadfast in your belief, you take that data, you incorporate it into whatever you're doing, you change the marketing message or you change the survey wording, and you put it back out there, and more often than not, you'll see improvement. And startups is really all about progress towards that goal. You're never going to hit that goal right off the bat, but if you stay on that path and you take all the feedback, you're more than likely going to end up in the place where you want.
Well, another comment came in sort of similar. We will be interviewing potential target audience, and the girls have developed a set of questions to do this. In the event, the audience feedback is that they will not use this type of an app. What advice do you have to refocus the girls so that they're not so discouraged?
Yeah, I would sort of change it and ask them what type of app would they use? What really is a pain point for them, and maybe you'll find some middle ground that you'll get some information from those people that sparks a new idea or an even more passionate area where the girls can focus on. But again, being getting a response that you're not that's not necessarily positive. If you look at it as a learning and you take that data and then you put that back into your next project, it's all the better.
Mm-hmm. Oh, we keep getting more questions. This is great. So the question is, what is the most effective tool do you use to gather feedback face to face, social media, others?
Yeah, that's a great question, and there's quite a few depending on where you are in your product. Initially, it's a lot of discussion. It's a lot of phone calls, surveys, face-to-face, and then when we actually build our first versions of the product, we want to make sure that we build in tracking tools so we can understand how users are using the product. If it's an application like a lot of the girls are building, I would want to know how long they're on my application for. If they're only spending a few seconds and then they're leaving the app, I know something's wrong. If they're going to a certain page or a certain part of my app uh, every time and then leaving after they hit that part, maybe there's something wrong with that. And so making sure you build in analytics into your application, I think is key because, again, that informs you with real data on how people are using your product. But up front, it's a lot of just discussion. It's a lot of calling. It's a lot of tracking through, we track using Excel, for example, of who have we called, what did they say, what do they like, what do they not like. You can use tools like SurveyMonkey to send out surveys. So there's lots of tools available depending on where you are in a product.
Yeah, there's also Google Forms, and that's pretty easy too.
Mm-hmm.
Lillian asks, what do you look at when you assess the competition for your idea or product?
So we look at, again, how big is the market? Who else is doing that? How many companies are out there? How well funded are they? Do they have $100 million war chest that they can use, or are they very new businesses that maybe don't have that much of a head start? We often look at the team. Is the team capable of outperforming us or out executing us?
Hmm.
But it's really more about us finding an angle or a new breakthrough that allows us to sort of leapfrog the competition rather than building something that already exists.
Neat. Hey, I'm wondering if any of the students on the webinar have any questions. So far, I've seen a bunch of questions from the mentors and coaches, but I'd love to hear from students, and I bet Alex would too. Or if any of the coaches or mentors want to comment on what it's been like for the students. Some of you gave some pretty cool examples of some bumps in the road you guys had. Well, we have Alex on the line, and we should take full advantage. So, in the meantime, I'm wondering, Alex, if you have any. Oh, Lillian's a student. Thanks. Okay, Wendy asks, hi, is there any way we can contact you with specific questions about our app ideas?
Sure. My email is alex@idealab.com. You're all welcome to ask me questions. I can promise you that I won't get back to you very quickly, but I will get back to you.
Yes, just so we
But
don't.
feel free to send me.
Oh, send Alex questions. I just typed your email. There's only a handful of people that would probably ask anyway, so I don't feel so bad sharing your email. But I think if you have other questions, whether you're a mentor, coach, or student, you can definitely email me too, and I could help get some of those to Alex. So I'm putting my email in the chat room, amy@technovationchallenge.com. So we have a comment. I have been amazed by how quickly the girls make decisions. Is that because they're younger or there's less bureaucracy?
That seems like a subjective question, but I will tell you that working in a startup, you can really have a great impact. There's not a lot of layers that you have to go through, and you have to wear multiple hats. Everybody does a lot of everything. There's not one specific role that a startup employee has, and so I encourage people to look at startups as a real path, a career path, because of the impact that you can have and the learnings that you do. You have to do so many things and learn so much about so many aspects of the business. There's really no better breeding ground for learning how to run your own.
Ah, a really good question just came in. Can you please give us some tips on team building and how do you gel along with your team?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think team is such a big aspect of the success of a lot of the companies we work on. I would say, don't try to buddy up with too many people like you or who have the same skill sets as you. It's important to have complementary skills. So you might, one person might be very comfortable with talking to people and talking to potential customers, and another person might like the technology side more and the actual coding. And so, finding teams that have very separate skill sets, but that work very well together is extremely important. When you have too many people who can do the same thing or sort of act the same way, you're not giving yourself as good a chance of success as you do when you have a very diverse team with very diverse skill sets.
Uh-huh. I see a comment. We're students and we're just wondering how to go about surveying potential customers if they're not students like us. What's the best way to ask the general public their opinion if we can't contact them directly?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's some tools out there that are free that if you look online and uh, look at places like Google Forms or SurveyMonkey that will actually have an audience that you can tap into. But one of the best ways that we do is we walk down the street and we talk to people. We ask them questions. You all have friends, you all have family. Talk to them. They may be able to point you to other people that you can talk to. But really try to find people who are in the problem area that you're trying to solve. And so oftentimes we'll call companies directly and say, hey, we're working on a specific product in your area, and we're trying to get some feedback on whether or not we're onto something, and we're trying to find experts like yourself. And oftentimes, it may take you 10 phone calls, but you'll get one or two people who will be happy to share some feedback with you.
Uh-huh. One question is, what should young people study in middle and high school if they're interested in becoming entrepreneurs?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. Entrepreneurs are very varied in what they've studied. So you'll have business entrepreneurs, you'll have computer science, sort of coder entrepreneurs. I don't think it's so much about what you study. It's more about being, really intellectually curious and really passionate about whatever it is you're doing. Being an entrepreneur is very difficult. There's lots of ups and downs. It's really hard going in the very early stages. You're probably making less money than people who are at big companies with very stable jobs. And so being passionate about what you're doing is a real key component. And then, of course, being curious about how would you go about solving that, and why is that different than what else is out there? But if you look at the history of entrepreneurs, they've studied so many different areas and have such varied backgrounds that I don't think there's any one thing that you should study. Although nowadays there's great courses on entrepreneurship in almost every college in America.
Yeah, I have a related question. So I think it ties into being innovative and being passionate. So one is all ideas being equal. Which ones do you guys choose? Are they new ideas or are people reinventing the wheel? Like what really makes something stand out to you guys if it seems like a lot of other similar products?
Yeah, again, for us, it's the team, and it's on the product and company side. Is this something that no one's really thought of doing? And I'm trying to think of a specific example. But way back in 1997, we started a company called Cars Direct, and this was a company that sold cars online. Nowadays, you can do a bunch of research. You can buy our car online. There's TrueCar, where you can do all of it through a mobile app, in fact. But we were one of the first to sort of put the idea of buying cars online, and it was because nobody believed people would put their credit cards onto the internet. Nobody thought that was possible. Nobody thought they would actually do that, and obviously now people are buying all sorts of things online. And I think, for us, it's a matter of testing something that we think is contrary to what people might think, and if we get the data and we get the feedback that we think supports that, we'll probably go that direction. So what's something that people aren't thinking about, or what's something that people aren't necessarily doing at this point that we think we can get them to do?
Yeah, I wonder if that ties into the idea of helping people realize they need something that they didn't realize they needed, convincing them.
Yeah, and again, talking about what really is their pain point. I mean, what is the problem that you're trying to solve? We started a company called Picasa that was all about organizing digital photos, and we talked to a bunch of people, and they said, you know what, I love digital photos, but now I just have so many of them. I don't know how to organize them. I don't know how to categorize them. I don't know which folders to put them in. And so we created Picasa that ultimately sold to Google that was doing just that thing, organizing digital photos.
Cool. And I think we'll end on this one last point. So Sonica says how to keep the girls motivated. And, some team members may not be as excited as others. I think being passionate about the problem is really going to come through when they're working on their pitch videos for us. So, how do you help tease out a story or the passion of the people in your team?
Yeah, I think it's, we're trying to find people who are uh, really excited and really passionate about that particular problem.
Mhm.
So everybody has some particular area in their life they'd like to improve, or maybe they'd like to improve the lives of others. So focusing in on what really, if you had all the money in the world and were retired and could do anything you wanted to do with your life, what would you be doing? What would you be spending your time on? What problems would you be trying to solve? And then focusing on areas that are in that realm and focusing on apps that maybe are part of that problem. But without the passion and without the excitement of what you're doing, it's very difficult to sort of move forward, especially when you're building apps and gathering feedback and doing all these things. So, trying to figure out what it is that really excites you, what it is that stimulates you intellectually, what it is you'd be spending your time on if you wasn't a class, or if it wasn't for money, or if it wasn't for uh, whatever it is, I think is really, really important.
That's really cool. I think we're going to end on that topic, but before we close the webinar, I'm wondering if you have any additional ideas, Alex, on resources that our folks here can access, or any closing comments.
Well, I think you can do a lot of searching online and find resources for startup folks. There's plenty available if you dig in it just a little bit. But I would say, an important thing that we think about here at Idealab is it's all about the people. And if you are really passionate about something and you want to solve a particular problem and it's something that's keeping you up at night, don't let failure be an option for you. Keep fighting, keep talking to people, keep focused on what you're trying to achieve, and ultimately, at the end of the day, you're going to be the one that's standing there when all the other competitors have failed, or all the other people working on that problem, just don't want to keep after it. Anyone can be an entrepreneur. Just make sure that you're focused on something that you're really passionate about, because there's no better job than working on something that you truly love.
Cool. Well, would like to just wrap that up because that's such a great note to end on, and I think it's going to help motivate the students who are taking part in this pretty intensive challenge. And I'm really excited to see the ideas that they're coming up with, learning about the problems that are in their communities that they're going to be addressing, and helping them tackle these issues by learning tech skills. So, part of that is also conveying your passion about the problem and getting people interested. So, the last thing I wanted to mention was the pain point, because we hear this so much when we talk about solving problems and who our users are. I loved your discussion about the vitamins and the aspirin. So I'm going to remind students, coaches, and mentors alike to think about whether the problem and solution are really, aspirin or whether they're vitamins. So that's pretty neat. And I'd like to also just mention that this was the beginning of a webinar series that we're going to be doing for you guys as you work on your projects. And I would love if you joined us for the next ones and kept your eyes peeled for announcements about them. We do have some scheduled about pitching and about business planning. So we can't emphasize enough at this stage in the game of your projects how important brainstorming and prototyping and asking user questions are. So, on that note, I'm going to say goodbye, and I'm going to thank Alex again so much for joining us from Idealab. You were so great.
My pleasure, and good luck to everybody.
All right. Bye, everybody.